Hi, Chris. Welcome back.
Stephanie, it is so good to see your smiling face. How are you?
How was Vegas?
Vegas was Vegas. I don't know about you, but anytime I'm in Vegas, it's always one day too long. I don't know, like you stay there for a day, it's like, God, I wish I would never gone. If it's stay there for 2 days, like, one day would have been enough. So it was good. Conference was great. CES this year was interesting. Lots of dancing robots, a smart toilet. A few interesting, we'll say, adult-related technologies that were highlighted there at the show. So,
did you get any freebies that you took home from that particular department?
No, not from that particular booth. I mean, always good freebies from them, but did not buy a dancing robot yet.
And I'm curious what needs to be smart about your toilet.
That's a great question. So it's not only is it a smart toilet, it's an AI-driven smart toilet because, it's all got to be AI these days. Yeah, it measures your hydration and when you poop. It's important to know. It's like, hey, that's Stephanie. She hasn't pooped in a couple days. We probably have to alert her. We got to let her know.
Listen, girls don't do that.
I know. Oh, I know. You guys don't poop.
I like when we go away to these conferences and these events and like what we learn about our experiences there and what we can. I just came back from Florida in December, and one of the places that we were touring, you can go and swim with sharks. Like they have all of the marine parks and everything like that. And honestly, like I would have gone, but it was just way too expensive. It would have cost an arm and a leg.
C minus.
No.
I mean, I don't want to tell you, I got a new job, part-time job, but I'm going to be one of the bell ringers at a church. I get to go in. Today's an important day. They're going to show me the ropes.
Okay. Oh boy.
I like my show me the ropes joke. Arm and a leg joke.
Maybe our guests who are watching right now can comment and tell us who had the best dad joke. But let's talk business. Why does fixing one part of your company keep breaking something else? Ari Weitzweig started with a deli in Ann Arbor. Today, Zingerman's, the deli, is a $70 million community of interconnected businesses because he designed it as a system, not a collection of separate profit centers. Today on How to Founder, we're going to be talking about systems thinking for your org chart. This is after my own heart, how delivery, service, operations, and finance connect as an interconnected system. I'm your host, Stephanie Hayes. With me is my wonderful co-host, Chris Franks.
Why does it sound ironic when you say wonderful to me? I don't know.
It's a little anticlimactic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful. Like,
so great. So amazing. Our guest, Todd, is a turnaround strategist who has generated over $200 million in enterprise value by helping companies see their structure as a connected system instead of isolated departments. I can't wait for this conversation. I love it. And let's bring Todd on. And hi, Todd. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you guys?
Great.
Todd, your internet is being, no audio delay. Todd, first of all, you have to say where you're from.
I am from Cleveland, Ohio. We are snowed in this morning.
Of course, we have to make jokes about internet in Cleveland just being a little slower than the rest of the country. It's fine.
You download the latest version? Is that what happened?
Sometimes the internet runs out on top of your house, and you got to go back up and fill the tape up. It's just one of those things.
Okay, Todd, let's dive in. When you look at a company's org chart, what connections or dependencies do founders often miss between all of the different working parts of their organization? Let's dive right in.
Sure. Yeah, I think the key that people often miss is how certain positions can end up being a multiplier within your organization. And a lot of times people look at like the engineering department and the sales department and different things like this, but don't realize that there are certain positions that are going to determine how productive those separate departments are. And those are the positions that especially small companies, founders, and small businesses sometimes miss, that larger companies understand a little better. And I've seen it on both sides. I've been a founder. I've owned a small business. I've run large businesses, and these multiplier positions are really what I think is a top topic for today's discussion.
Yeah, so let's dive in a little bit further into give us some details, give us some specifics. What is a good example of a multiplier position?
Yeah, so for example, like inside of an organization, we can deliver lip service on continuous improvement and things such as that. Having an actual person that is going to drive continuous improvement and make sure that they're working with each of the divisions or each of the areas of the company to start and finish projects. That would be the multiplier position. Somebody who is not only going to make their portion productive, but actually make every single other person in the company more productive by taking things off their plate that they might not be the best at. So the idea is, and something that I always talk about in my companies is, we want you working all 40 to 50 hours of your week on things that only you can do. So if you think about a multiplier position, what they're doing is they're taking the stuff off your plate that is not your specialty, right? So you don't need to learn how to do continuous improvement. You need to show up to the meetings and activate the continuous improvement. And so that multiplier position is the person putting you in the situation where you can spend all your time making money.
Yeah. So continuous improvement, lean, like all of those frameworks really apply well and work well in larger organizations. How do we back that up for a founder of a new organization of a small business? Like, how do we find a version of that that's going to apply to someone who's just starting out?
Yeah, and I thought when I bought my first small company, I thought that might be a challenge, where there wouldn't be enough things to do in the continuous improvement realm. What I found is that it's actually much easier to drive continuous improvement in a small organization where you don't have to break through all the barriers of, it's been this way for 30 years. It affects 15 people's jobs, everything. You have to retrain the whole org on a different methodology. But things such as like driving a new quoting calculator to lower lead time, or changing the way you purchase an inventory item so that you can be more flexible in your manufacturing. Like, all these things are actually much easier to do inside of a small organization. But continuous improvement is a mindset, right? So if somebody's been in that role for 6 to 10 to 50 years, they're not going to be able to see that blind spot that they've been missing that entire time. That's where you bring in somebody to potentially, it could be an outside consultant, it could be yourself, it could be a friend of yours to come in and look at the business. But then driving the continuous improvement in is actually extremely easy in small organizations. I would say you do have to break through that. We've always done it that way. And my method of doing that was kind of to take the visibility of the change away from the group and just have them deal with the actual actions, but not. So for example, like, I remember raising price pretty significantly inside of my small business. And this was part of a continuous improvement change when I made the calculator to speed up quoting. At the same time, I took the price out of the equation for the people doing the quoting, so they couldn't actually see that the price was changing. They just saw that the quote ended up different the way they were doing it. So I took away the objection that sometimes the small businesses that are stuck in their ways, would have, saying you can't do that with the pricing. Well, we did. It worked. And it's all our own mental block that stopped us from doing it before that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Chris, I'm curious how you are perceiving that. I mean, you're in the position of, CEO essentially of a small business, essentially, right? And you have been a founder and you have built your own. When would you start thinking about something like this within your organization?
I think it's the thing that struck me is, first of all, that, Todd, you said that there's multipliers. Stephanie just calls me a subtractor, everything that I'm in. So just if I'm around,
Divider.
Yeah, a divider. I think it's the first thing that strikes me is I think in a very early company. So right now there's 3 of us full time, 3.5 of us, and there's not a lot of silos because we're all in one little bitty office and we just work together, et cetera. The moment you get to that point where there's these silos that are created, you start to do things and you start to have systems and processes, is the moment you start to realize that you need to improve the systems and processes. The moment that happens. And I think early it's probably the job of a founder, Todd. I think it's somebody in those first stages, it's our job to go in and say, okay, let's look at this whole thing. Let's look at this from a systematic level, not from in the business, but on top of the business, and start to figure out what's broken and what needs to be better. I mean, is that your take, Todd?
Yeah, it is. And I think the key question that I've started to ask just over the last couple of years of a fairly long career makes this much more simple inside of big or small businesses. The idea is if you do focus on this idea of making sure that your employees are focused solely on the things that only they can do, that is actually the easiest way to uncover continuous improvement opportunities when there aren't really silos, when it's just kind of all hands on deck and you're all running at everything all at the same time. Because what you're going to find out is that key employee that you have that's so good at everything, if you actually break down his week, figure out how much time he's spending doing the stuff only he can do rather than how much time he's spending doing the stuff that you're asking him to do, you know what I mean? That has to get done. You're going to find out that you're using your best talent to do some pretty meaningless tasks that just have to get done. And what you might find out is that those tasks cost $15 a month if you outsource them, or that those tasks cost $100 a month if you outsource them. And when you look at how much you're paying that person or how much value they could drive if they had 8 hours more, you'll find that there's some continuous improvement opportunities kind of hiding in plain sight, if that makes sense.
Stephanie, can I turn around and ask you this question too, which is like, so I think I end up being that person early on, right? Like, so I end up being the person that's doing all this stuff. It's probably, overpriced for the stuff that I'm actually doing, right? Stephanie, how do you let go of those things? Like, because for me, it's kind of this control mechanism early on. I'll give you, like accounts payable. Like, I want to make sure I'm involved in accounts payable, but reality is just a system. I can systematize, I can improve that from kind of the absolute mess it is today. Is that something I know, Stephanie, you do this for a living, but in the past, is that something you struggled with or no?
I would say, again, this is about getting to know yourself as a founder really well, but I would say that there's some friction here because there's a couple things going on. So founders want to do all the things because they want to make sure they understand and they know and that they have control, and because there's so much on the line and blah, 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 right? So there's a little bit of that. It also helps them feel like they're doing something. And so they'll often end up doing just all the things because then if they don't, they feel like maybe they're not contributing or they don't have any sort of impact on the success of the organization. And I would also say that a lot of CEOs they're the curse of the expert, right? They know their business too well. They think about it too much and they have all this narrative around it. And they often aren't really clear on what the business needs them to be doing. And so they focus on being that busy, exhausted founder because that's what I'm supposed to be. So when we start to take them out of the role that they think that they need to be in and get them doing the work that the business needs them to do, that can be a really important transition for them. Where it starts to get kind of funny is when the business needs X, and yet your people, Jane over here in this role is doing the work, but actually her best work and her most aligned work is something else. And so the business needs her to do these things or somebody to do these things, yet Jane's most aligned work is over here doing something else. And maybe the business isn't ready for that. And we're just kind of coming across that right now in one of our businesses. And so we've had to let someone depart not because they didn't perform, but because what the business needs right now is not aligned with what this person is most skilled at. So I'm wondering, Todd, when you come up against that, what does that sort of trigger for you?
Yeah, so a couple of things as you were talking that popped into my mind. I have a keynote where I talk about poor people add, millionaires multiply, but billionaires subtract. And the idea there is that busy is not brilliant. You know what I mean? Like busy is not breakthrough. And as we are early in our careers, and I did this, dramatically, I would spend 60, 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week. That was a badge of honor. I was so busy, I'd have 2 phone calls like this going at a time, like listening in on conference calls, and real quickly realized later in the career that is not how you work. And then I came up with this multiplier mentality where it's like, okay, what we need to do is multiply our effort and make sure that every hour we're spending gets 2 hours of productivity. But then I ran into somebody who goes, billionaires subtract. And the idea there is extreme focus, and getting stuff out of the org. Like you said, sometimes there's just stuff that's happening inside the org that you don't need to do anymore, or that it's not your core competency. And sometimes you have to get rid of that. And if somebody is attached to that and they don't have other skills, then unfortunately that's going to happen, what you just said. You know what I mean? But that's an extreme focus mentality where you are going to make more money, again, if you spend all your time on the things that are, we always say, make as much money as you can every minute of the day. That's kind of the mantra, right? And you want yourself to be as productive as possible, because people don't care if they work an extra half hour. That's not what they get mad about. What they get mad about is having to work an extra half hour when they wasted 2 hours in the middle of the day, right? That's when they get upset. And we've all been there where it's like, man, if I had not had that 2-hour silly meeting, I would have gotten home an hour earlier today. You know what I mean? That's when you get angry. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when we come back to the original topic about your org chart is a system. Your departments and all of the pieces of your business work in harmony with themselves or should work as a system. Why doesn't that happen?
Yeah. So the biggest reason in my mind that it doesn't happen is that people don't have respect for what the other folks are doing. Okay. So, and let me explain what I mean by that. If you ask each of the people in your company or each of the divisions in your company, people will often say, like, our division or myself is super productive. You know what I mean? Other folks is where the unproductivity comes in, and what happens is it's because of the way we manage our schedule. It actually comes back to scheduling quite a bit. Is you put a meeting on the books and you invite everybody, you know what I mean? Because they may have some input on that topic, but if they don't have input on the decision, or if they are not a decision maker, are they really valuable in that meeting? Do they need to be in there for the whole hour and a half? Could they come in for 15 minutes at the beginning or the end? Could they have an email afterwards? Do you know what I mean? But as you start to build your schedule, a lot of people have 20%, 30% too many employees because of the way that they schedule all of their activities. And you just need that many people because so many people have their hands in so many things. We call it decision dictatorship. And people don't like that word, but decision democracy causes you to have 20% more overhead and causes you to be extremely unproductive. Whereas decision dictatorship doesn't mean the CEO makes every decision. It means one person makes each decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In my experience, I think integration, like an integrated culture and integration across an organization, is very much facilitated by walking away from a real hierarchical model of how we build our organization. So, Chris, I'm going to go back to you for a second. You are right in this phase right now of deciding how the.
I was crying a little bit. I was tearing up when Todd was talking about the time.
This is normal. He's a pretty emotional guy.
Seeing a few mistakes that I've made along the way, sure, yeah.
But so. We've talked about this before, and this is, obviously a soapbox that I get up on, but when we start thinking about the hierarchy inside of our organization, when we start thinking about it early on, we can avoid these traps of high growth companies where that disintegration starts happening because we get so focused on process and trying to put everything in buckets. And so how do we stop that thinking early on so we don't end up in that like almost lacking agility because we've tried to fix things the way that a big old corporation is going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm preparing to teach an organizational design class, and it's about how do you design larger, particularly very large organizations to be effective. And I'm looking at my experience right now. And Todd, the thing that you said, it just resonates so deeply with me. It's the thing that we screw up the most, Stephanie, is that we fail to remember that the single most valuable thing that we have control of at any given moment is our time. And then secondarily, it's the time of the people that work in the organization. Like, how are we directing the organization to try to get things done? That requires management leadership skills. It requires us to move in the right direction, et cetera. And so to answer your question directly, Stephanie, it's about the allocation of time. And it is a huge resource. It's the only resource, really. You've got capital, but that capital typically is earmarked to go to other places. You have to, spend that money to go do things, right? How you do that work is everything. And so I think that for me as a founder, and I am going through this right now, there's so many different hats that I'm wearing. How do I prioritize which hat that I'm putting on at any given moment and how much time I allocate to that? And the reality is that I find myself in stressful environments defaulting to something that makes me feel productive, but is not the most important thing.
Yeah.
So like, I'm going to go back and look at this spreadsheet again because I like spreadsheets. It's orderly.
Yeah.
There's columns and rows. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And forgive me if I come up with a framework or discuss a framework here, but it's a mathematical equation that I think is valuable for people to keep in mind. So when I was growing up in business, a lot of folks would actually talk about this activity times efficiency equals success equation. And that really resonated with me, right? You can either work more hours or you can be better at your job. You know what I mean? And if you do one and not the other, you still get more done. If you do both, it kind of multiplies, right? So it's really easy. Just tell your guys to work more hours and get better at their job, right? Like super simple. So what happened is, as I got later on, I realized that a third part of that equation exists, and that's this focus. So it's activity times efficiency times focus equals results. And that's how much of your time you're spending on the things that only you can do and the things that make the most money. Now, on top of that, because of technology, the second aspect of that, the efficiency, has changed pretty dramatically, because now we can take the things that we are doing in the day, and there's a big difference between somebody who's really good at their job and somebody who's really good at their job and understands technology to the point that they can start systematizing, automating, using AI, using outsourcing. All these things exist in a much different capacity than they did 10 years ago. And so you can have the same person with unequal skills, like actually fewer skills, that is way more productive because they understand that second issue, which is the efficiency of their day. And then you take it to the schedule, Chris, and you say, okay, now I'm going to focus and make sure that all 8 of my hours are on things that only I can do and that are making me the most money. And all of a sudden, that equation can actually be 400 to 500% more productive. Because if you think about the 100 things you have to do this week, you might only spend a half hour to 3 hours on each of them. But if you get it down to 3 or 4, these are the things that I'm going to do that drive the most value to the business, and you spend 10 hours a week on it, it's 4 or 5 times as much time spent on those key activities. And if you think about it in a bigger business like you're talking, Chris, and you have 150 people doing that, that's how we run our business. So we say every one of you needs to spend as much time as possible on these key 3 to 5 activities. It's different for each person. That is driving the most value to the organization. All of a sudden, you're 400%, more productive. And that's actually, we've doubled EBITDA at 3 different companies with this methodology.
I want to steer us back to the topic that we were starting on here, and we've kind of meandered off into productivity and time and that sort of thing. And I don't think that's so much the intention what we're trying to tease out here, and I think this is a really important and interesting conversation to have, which is the integration of all of the different pieces of our business, right? And that may or may not happen regardless of how you spend your time. So I want to go back to this business as a system, and how do we avoid that trap of building silos and having these sort of disintegrated pieces of the business? And I think that has to be a very intentional effort, because it's very easy to follow old business principles when we don't know anything better, and start building HR departments and start building like all of these things that are actually going to keep us not agile. So how do we get an integrated system as a business, as opposed to this department, that department? Like, what is key there? And I liked sort of teasing out this concept of multiplier roles, but I do want to like dive into that, because I think that there's this concept of moving away from hierarchical team structures to thinking more about the role that you play inside of a community of workers, right? Are you a connector? Are you rather than am I a project manager? Are you a connector? Are you a learner? Are you a commander? Like all those kinds of things.
Sure. Yep.
I feel like that and the way that we structure our work is where the integration comes from. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think they are definitely interconnected. So I had a great business mentor once in business school, and he told me something that I'll never forget, because and you guys will get this. So he goes, matrix organizations don't work in any industry in the world except for hospitals. But when you go out into the world, you're going to run into a matrix organization every time. And the idea is, and it happens, right? Whirlpool and Berkshire Hathaway and other companies I've been involved in, like big names, and they all put this together. And it's because they want to build the silos, but then they want every silo to have impact on everybody else's silo. Do you know what I mean? So they're trying to actually do what you're talking about. So how do we break down the silos? But instead they put the silos up, but then give nobody decision dictatorship. Nobody's allowed to make their own call. They have to get everything approved by everybody. And it turns into this, there's not two options. The two options are not, let's have total silos or let's have everybody involved in every decision. The options is have experts in each silo, but then have decisions owned by one person throughout the entire organization. Like each decision is owned by one different person throughout the entire organization, and they don't have to get 12 people's permission to make that decision. And so where you get multipliers, so first of all, the multipliers are supposed to look back and say, okay, how do I make people more productive? So how do I look at the HR department and the engineering department and get our engineers and HR to be more productive? And they pull tasks off of people, or they reorganize and say, okay, this is the person that needs to make this decision, and this is the person that needs to make that decision. And if everyone's always making decisions rather than talking about making decisions, you're going to be more productive, in the long run. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's more connected than some people think. And they get this, like it either has to be silos or it has to be matrixed mentality. And in reality, you can have silos all day long. You just need to have decisions made by the correct people in the org, even if it affects that silo, which will inherently integrate the organization, if that kind of resonates.
Yeah, again, I think this is less a topic about productivity, and it's more a conversation about how we structure work, right? And yes, decisions are part of that, but how do these different departments, like, what's their accountability, and what are the touch points in which they have natural integration with each other? Chris, can you imagine like layering this on to the way that your businesses are growing, and find a way that this starts happening early?
Yeah, I think it's what Todd's saying is where silos get created naturally is where you put people that are good at jobs together. So let's say, like finance or accounting or something like that. There's a group of people that are particularly skilled at that. You put them together in a room, they start working together because those are the people that are best at that. But then they start working and they just work amongst each other, and then they don't communicate. And so systematically, and I think this is the point that we're trying to make, Stephanie, which is I, as a founder of a growing company, I need to make sure that I'm building communication systems and decision-making systems across the organization really from day one. And I'm driving down decisions, and I want to make sure that I, as a CEO, make very, very clear about what decisions I want to make and what decisions I want them to make. And sometimes that's even harder, Todd. I don't want to make the decision about what technology we're choosing for some application, but yet I still get people come back to me and be like, well, what do you think? It's like, I don't know. Make the decision, man. And it's making other people feel comfortable about those decision points as well. And so, Stephanie, to your point, how do you do that? I think that it is about putting people in the right position to work together.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? There are some people that just want to have their heads down, and that's okay, right? And there's others that we need to communicate with.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people talk about the RACI chart, and a lot of times, if you're familiar with it, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. You know what I mean? So you take each action within an org, who is responsible for it, who is accountable for the decision, who is consulted about the decision, and who's informed about the decision. And people think that this is just for bigger companies. And oftentimes, every time I've been involved in a RACI, actually, it's been these large companies that suddenly realize they are out of control and nobody, they're trying to fix what you're talking about, Stephanie, and they come up with the RACI so that everyone gets aligned on who owns what and who needs to talk to who about what and get all integrated. But in reality, RACI belongs in small companies too, because if you build it that way, you don't end up hiring the person that you have to exit because it turned into a wasted role, as you kind of figured out what you're going to focus on. And so the RACI allows people to understand when they should be talking across the org, when they should be informing across the org, when you are accountable, but somebody else is going to be held responsible for that decision, so that that you might need to go to Chris and say, hey, I'm about to make this call, but I just want to make sure you're good with it because you're going to have to stand up and deal with the consequences of it. Do you know what I mean? So that RACI chart is a really good tool, even for small orgs, actually, maybe even especially for small orgs, to accomplish what you're talking about, Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in a lot of RACI exercises in the IT space and blah, blah, blah. But I also think that there's...
You are RACI, Stephanie. You're just RACI.
Super RACI.
Yeah.
RACIs are great for having the conversations and helping people sort of get on the same page. I'll push just a little bit more on this, that I think the most sustainable way of creating integration within an operating model is not so much by imposing rules, but by looking at what the organization naturally does. And there's this whole concept of organizational network analysis where you're almost looking at the deer trails inside the organization, like who's actually talking to whom and who actually needs things from whom. And you build your organization around those kind of natural networks within that start to emerge and that are sort of, prevalent within the organization. Okay. We're coming up on time. Todd, are you emotionally ready for the speed round?
I think so. I just heard about it today, but I think we'll be okay.
Okay, we're going to dive in. And again, if you hate the question, you can say, I hate the question. If you want to, but the idea is just to get some quick gut reaction. All right, let's go. All right, let's dive in. Delivery hits all metrics, but customers still complain. Whose problem is it?
Ours. Yeah, your problem is setting expectations.
Right, but who owns the problem?
Oh no, the customer. So the company definitely owns the problem. You have to. If the customer is still complaining, it means you didn't set expectations, and that means your delivery didn't hit on all metrics. It hit on all the metrics you put on paper.
Okay. Your best performer creates problems downstream. Keep them or coach them out?
Coach them out. So you honestly, your best performer needs to be a multiplier. It can't be somebody who's making other people less productive.
Okay. One function is dragging. Do we add resources or redesign the handoffs?
You definitely redesign the handoffs. Adding resources is never a solution unless you're about to drive more money to the bottom line.
Yeah, I thought you might say that.
Yeah.
Optimize the function or optimize the system?
optimize the system. I think that almost everything is systems based when you really boil it down to it.
Okay. Finance should understand operations deeply or stay in their lane?
No, finance should definitely understand operations deeply. It'll probably cut down 12 hours of meetings a month.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Great conversation. A couple of deep dive resources for you. The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge and Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. Good conversation today. Todd, how can our listeners learn more about you?
Absolutely. ToddHagopian.com. I have hundreds of articles on there about the different frameworks that we use to drive productivity, profitability, and better decision making. And then obviously I have the book coming out here next week. So The Unfair Advantage on Amazon by Todd Hagopian is actually a business fiction novel that goes through a lot of these frameworks in a fictional setting that'll help you understand it.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. Well, go pick up Todd's book and learn a little bit more about integrating those creating your business as a system. I'm a huge advocate for that. Chris, you want to take us home?
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Todd, thanks for joining us. Good conversation. We do this 3 times a week. Stephanie, myself, Anthony. If you like us, go to How to Founder, subscribe, maybe even leave us a nice review. If you like us. If you don't like us, don't leave us a review. Just kind of ignore that part. But genuinely, we're incredibly honored to do this work. We believe that founders are amazing, that they bring economic prosperity to us all. So thank you for the work that you do. We're just honored to be here for Along the Ride. So that is it for us today on How to Founder, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.